Good afternoon and welcome to the Douglas County Racial and Ethnic Disparities, also known as RED, virtual conference. My name is LaDonna Jones Dunlap and I am one of the co-chairs of the Racial and Ethnic Disparities Subcommittee. I'd like to give a special thank you to the Separate Juvenile Court of Douglas County, Nebraska, the Honorable Vernon Daniels, also CEO and President of the Urban League of Nebraska, Mr. Thomas Warren Sr., and Douglas County Commissioner Chris Rogers. These individuals provide unwavering support for our RED efforts and make our work possible. An additional thank you to the Nebraska Juvenile Justice Association for making this virtual platform possible. A few housekeeping items. All participants have been placed on mute. If you have a question for our presenter, please enter it into the chat box. We will monitor questions as they come in and get as many as time permits after the presentation. For purposes of CEUs, if you are viewing this webinar in a room with others, please make sure to type your name and email address into the chat so you receive your certificate. Certificates will be emailed out this week along with a short survey. Now I will turn it over to the Juvenile Detention Alternatives Initiative Coordinator, Michelle Salter.
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Shelley Salter. I'm the JDI coordinator for Douglas County. I want to welcome you all on behalf of the Alternatives to Detention Subcommittee to our third webinar of a three-part series focused on alternatives to detention. This afternoon, we're going to be learning about multi-agency resource centers, one in Calcasieu Parish, Louisiana. The MARC serves as a single entry point into child welfare, juvenile justice, and prevention systems. They provide screening, assessment, and linkage to community-based services in an effort to divert youth from system involvement. Since June of 2011, the MARC has served over 11,000 youth, diverting 82% of them from the formal system. Absenteeism has also been reduced by 26% with their school-based diversion. Before we start today, though, I want to make everyone aware of the efforts that the MARC has made to be with us today. Their parish was hit very hard by one of the recent hurricanes, and our original presenter, Anthony Celestine, lost his family home as a result of flooding and has had to relocate until at least March of next year. Additionally, Anthony was promoted to being the agency leader for the MARC and has assumed some additional responsibilities. So today we're going to have Josh Campbell filling in from an off-site location he's had to go to make sure that he has the access to the technology that we need for him to be here today. So I want you all to know that Josh first is a husband and his wife, a husband to his wife, Leslie Campbell, and a father to their three amazing children, which Josh has educated him every day on the importance of family. He completed his undergraduate studies at McNeese State University in psychology and sociology, later earning certifications as an addictions counselor and clinical supervisor through the Louisiana Addictive Disorder Regulatory Authority. Joshua has 17 years of experience supporting families, working as a functional family therapist and clinical director for the 14th Judicial Juvenile Drug Court, and for the past 8 years as the manager of the Calcasieu Parish Multi-Agency Resource Center. Josh currently serves as a member of the Annie E. Casey Foundation's Applied Leadership Network, board member for the National Assessment Center Association, and the Southwest Louisiana Youth Foundation. Alternatives to Detention for the state of Louisiana's JDI Scale Initiative, and training facilitator for the School in Maine Reimagining Juvenile Justice Professional Development track. Josh and the MARC both know that juvenile assessment centers have all the components to provide families with equitable outcomes and opportunities to be happy, healthy, and successful. His hope is that this work can give youth and families better opportunities for success, the same as we would want for our own children. So here we go, Josh Campbell.
Always have a little bit of technical difficulty starting. That was a very good intro, but she forgot to mention that at 44 years old, Josh Campbell got to move back in with his parents under the circumstances that we're in. So I'm actually the alternative place that Shelley was speaking of is home. They're the only ones around with internet. All right, I believe everyone should be able to see my screen right now, hopefully. I'm going to go started. Like Shelley said, I'm Josh Campbell with the Multi-Agency Resource Center. I've been there since 1 year. I came on in June of 2012, and the center opened in June of 2011. And just to share a quick story, I started out outside of the MARC Center in June of 2011, wishing that I would have the opportunity to work there because it seemed like such an amazing opportunity for our families and youth in the community. And then 1 year later, I was actually with the opportunity to work there. Just so you know a little bit about our community, our parish is, and that's what the MARC Center serves as our actual parish of Calcasieu. Our population is around 200,000, and we have a median household of about 48,000. We actually serve 6 municipalities and 9 law enforcement agencies within our parish. And we're able to work with the court system through a memorandum of understanding that the Calcasieu Parish has with the Juvenile and Family Court, 14th Judicial Court here in Calcasieu. This is some of the reform work that we've taken part in. And just to highlight a little bit, MacArthur's Models for Change, that's really was a big driving force from us being able to prepare and open up our assessment center here in Calcasieu Parish. But out of the need and brevity and make sure we stay on time, I'm going to skip over these other ones. So how did we get here? We started doing the formal reform work in 2006 because we realized we just weren't doing right by our families. And we primarily focused back then, and the focus continued before then, is really looking at DOC placements, youth that were going into Department of Corrections custody. We were sending a large number of youth into state's custody from our parents. And we started realizing that not all those youth needed to be placed in Department of Corrections. A lot of them are going for low-level offenses back then. Sadly, like many of the jurisdictions around the nation, we thought the punitive approach was the best way to get change with youth. And we were doing what we felt was best at the time. What I say was best at the time was back then a youth could miss school, and then we would show up the next day and we would violate that youth potentially on their probation for missing school and arrest them and actually take them out of the school that we were wanting them to go to the day before. So we started realizing we had a lot of room for improvement. As you could see from the numbers as the year went on with DOC placements and the way we started handling youth, we did have some success. We had great intervention avenues in place for youth that were system involved. If that trouble, we had all kind of programs we could support them. I can remember as a counselor in the community actually working with kids in the drug court program. The family's like, I really think that program would benefit my child. How would they get in? And I remember thinking the only avenue to get in is to get in legal trouble. That service wasn't really offered to them if they weren't already in some kind of legal trouble. So we realized we were doing really well with our youth that were in the system and system involved. But we also realized that we were still missing something. And when I say missing something, we realized the number of youth being referred to court and detention, it really wasn't decreasing. We had gotten a little stagnant there. We weren't always working with the right kids. It seemed like sometimes the low-level offenders may be getting more attention than the ones that really needed our attention to keep them from continuing to offend. And we were linking kids with services, but they weren't always effective. And it seemed like even when we got them into the right service, there was no guaranteed timely access. They could be waiting for up to a month or so for that service to actually become involved and engaged with the family. So we knew the timing in our parish was ripe for change. And in 2010, a group of community providers in our community, we called it the Children and Youth Planning Board, got together and did a needs assessment for the community. And they didn't just do a needs assessment with the service providers in the community and the court system, DA's office, public defender's office, people like that, and law enforcement, school systems. They actually interviewed a lot of the youth and sent a poll out for them to give their input on what was missing. And what we realized is kind of what we knew already. We had a gap in front-end services. We didn't really have good supports in place to give families what they need in a timely manner early on to keep them from entering into the justice system. So out of that needs assessment, in June of 2011, the MARC, or the Multi-Agency Resource Center, opened its doors to our community. The goal of the MARC was to provide that single point of access and a coordinated approach for families in our community that needed assistance, not just for youth that were already involved in the system, for anyone that was coming in. We're simply trying to, at that point, guide them in the right direction for what will work best for them. We had very simple goals. We wanted to be, as we said earlier, that single access point. We wanted to divert youth from the system, but we also didn't want to just divert them like we had maybe done in the past, where we send them on their way with no supports in place. We wanted to identify the root behaviors that were behind that charge or that offense of maybe why they were coming into our center. And we wanted to treat that so they were actually better off when they left, and the chances of them coming back would be decreased. We wanted to link youth to the best fit service for them, but also in a timely manner. So we wanted to make sure we were giving them what they needed, but they were also getting that service immediately. We wanted to start bridging that connection, or like we like to call it, maybe a warm handoff before the family left, contacting that service provider and getting that ball rolling. We wanted to reduce time between arrests and intakes, and we were able to do that. We'll see in data a little later, from months to days. If a youth commits an offense and it's not addressed immediately, similar to us, the chances of them reoffending are there. There's also a chance with youth, as we know, that they learn from their mistakes. And if we're bringing something up to them a month or so later, they're less likely to be engaged in it, or really frustrated on why are we even having this discussion at this point. And we were still part of the juvenile justice system. So we need to promote public safety and well-being. We needed to make sure that our community was safer with the processes we put in place. And we knew the community would need to know that to have buy-in. And the other thing we try to do is we never want to turn anyone away. So if we only serve our parish, but if anyone would come from out of parish, or anyone's older adults, if anyone needs directions to know how to get to Walmart, we're there for them. They can call us up and we'll give them the directions to Google. They can walk in, we'll print it out to them. Any needs the community had, we wanted to be there for them. Criteria was kept very simple for the type of cases we work with. Walk-in cases. This means any family at any time for any need under any circumstances can come in with no appointment necessary, and we can provide them with the same community supports as we would if we got a formal referral for a status offense or a delinquent offense. And naturally, as most assessment centers do, we work with alleged status and delinquent offenses that we will get either from the school system or the delinquent and status from law enforcement. Our primary age that we work with is 5 to 18 years old, but we have had younger come in and we have had older come in. The only way that we can't work with the youth, and this would be if we were doing that custody exchange like other assessment centers do from law enforcement transferring custody to us, is if that youth was intoxicated or injured. They'd have to be medically cleared prior to that. So this is just gives kind of an overview of what the interior of the MARC is set up to be. The green area is our front door, and this is where families would come in with youth that are not in custody, either for walk-ins or for referrals that we may get from DA's office or school system, that we're setting up appointments for them and they're coming in together. The yellow area in the back there is what we call our secure area, and that would be where we would take custody of youth that were coming in for offenses from law enforcement. That's our area where we would keep the youth until that guardian got there to make sure they're safe. We're not locking them in a secure area because they're in danger to us. We're taking custody of them, and we want to make sure they're safe until that parent arrives. The waiting room has a few benches in it. It has a TV, and we give them snacks. We're not really there to be punitive. It's not a scare tactic when they come through the back door. In fact, as soon as they walk through the door, we let them know that we're not going to be necessarily focusing on the behavior that got them there. We do have to address it, but we're going to look at their strengths, and we're going to be looking for ways to put things in place and supports they need so they never have to come back in that manner to the MARC Center. We've only had a few incidents in the back there where things have gotten a little tense. One youth knocked down a Christmas tree. One bumped the water cooler when there was a little bit of an argument with the guardian and it fell over, and we had a potted plant break. But we've done a really good job, I feel, of de-escalating situations before they escalate and letting that kid know this is the worst day of their life when they're coming in here. We want to make sure they know that we're here, we're on their side, and we're here to support them and help them. So if that youth would, well, let me get into the pink area first too. There's a little pink area there in between, and those are actually 3 separate rooms. We call them our JIFF rooms, which is a screening tool that we use there. What they also serve a purpose for is a custody transfer area. So that guardian, if that youth was in our custody, would come through the green area. They would meet in the pink area along with us and the youth that would come from the yellow area. And we explain what's going on, and we explain what our goals are, if they will allow us to work with them. And if agreed, then we would start the diversion process there. If they don't agree, then we would transfer custody back to the guardian. They would leave. Either way, the guardian is going to get custody back at that moment, because we don't want that youth to be in a secure area any longer than they have to. Let's just say the guardian went ahead and agreed to do our diversion program. At that point, the youth would stay in the pink area, and that they would complete our online screening tools. We would then take the guardian into the blue area where you see the family rooms. That's our conference rooms. And we would start doing a hard copy, a paper psychosocial with them. The experts on that youth are already in our facility. We don't really, 90% of what we rely on is going to come from the parents, and it's going to come from the children. They know their situation better than anyone else will. So we want to really get some good information from them and have them part of that process the whole way of making that individualized plan for them that will best meet their needs. Now, there may be some questions in people's minds. How are we able to make decisions like this on law enforcement offense reports or calls? The way we're able to do that is when law enforcement brings that youth to us, that transfer of custody paper is what we call an OJJS referral form. It's basically a condensed offense report. So it gives the who, what, when, and where, and what the youth is being charged with. We have that information, and then we have an agreement with our DA's office that they will staff these cases with us. So we send that to them via email, and they look it over, and they decide whether or not the charge will be rejected altogether, whether that youth can go through diversion, or whether they need to hold off and see if that youth needs to petition the court because of the degree of the offense. Now, DAs aren't always there to answer their phone, and we understand that because they're very busy, and these calls can happen during our operational hours of 8 a.m. to 2 a.m. Monday through Saturday, and then 1 p.m. to 11 p.m. on Sunday. We have an agreement with them, and we know the type of charges that they're normally willing to divert, that if we don't get a response within 15 minutes, that we can move forward the diversion process, letting the families know that the DA will have to still review it and may choose to override our decision for diversion. Honestly, that may have happened 1 or 2 times since we've been open since 2011, though. There's another area there at the bottom that's a purplish color for the counseling area. When we're doing our screening assessments with the youth, we're going to be talking about some traumatic experiences they may have gone through and bringing up some uncomfortable circumstances. We don't want that youth leaving our facility worse off than when they came in. So if our screening assessments flag in certain areas, we would call a licensed counselor in to meet with that family to make sure that youth is okay to go home. The group we use is called CART. It's a Child Adolescent Response Team. It is a Louisiana-based, Louisiana-wide service that's provided by the state. It's a 1-800 number that families can call at any time. They'll triage the situation over the phone, and if needed, they'll send someone out to the house to put a Band-Aid on the circumstances to make sure everyone's safe until the next morning when that youth can be placed in service. Well, our agreement with them is similar, except if a family's actually at our center, they'll come to the center regardless of the circumstances and the triage over the phone, and they'll meet with the family, and they'll make sure they're clear to go home. They basically put a safety plan in place until the next day, whenever they can continue to check in and follow up with them, or until that service, that warm handoff happens and they can get into a service to meet their needs. So I kind of went over the process a little bit in the last slide, so I'm going to just generally go over this. Let's say law enforcement picks up a youth for shoplifting. They will call us. We have a detention screening instrument, most called a risk assessment instrument, where we will screen the circumstance of that case. Naturally, shoplifting is a very low-grade offense. That's going to be one that we would tell law enforcement, bring them on into the MARC Center. Law enforcement would bring the youth to the MARC Center. We would get a copy of the OJJS referral form. We would review it with them, and then we would transfer custody to us and from law enforcement. And law enforcement is back out the door. We're hoping in 10 to 12 minutes. Sometimes they stay longer because they want to meet with the guardians, but they don't have to. Upon the custody transfer, parents are called. The law enforcement is supposed to call them before they get there, but we also call as a follow-up to let them know that their child is there and they're safe. And we try to find, the estimated time of arrival for them to be able to get to the MARC Center so we could start the process. Case is staffed with the district attorney. If the district attorney approves diversion and the family wants to go forward diversion, we start our our intake process then, where the youth starts doing the screening tool, our JIFF, Juvenile Inventory for Functioning, and we start meeting with the families to get the psychosocial completed. If at the end, and the family could change their mind at any time, so even at the end, when we come up with a plan, if they don't agree with the plan, they can refuse diversion, and then we will just send the case information back to DA, and they can make a decision on whether or not they want to move forward with the charge formally or if they want to reject the charge altogether. The family is always in the driver's seat, in our opinion, and when they come into our building. Naturally, there can be consequences if they choose not to do diversion, but we will advocate for them the whole way because no matter what, we don't want youth to have to go to court. And very rarely will a family decide to decline diversion opportunities with us. Basically, this is a flow chart similar to what we just discussed. The issues that families will come in for are right there. The sources will probably be similar to a lot of the sources that the court system and probation get in your jurisdictions also. And the MARC process basically is lined out there. If the youth would screen into detention, naturally they would go to detention, they'd be placed in secure detention. If they don't screen into detention, they come to the MARC center, we start a diversion process. And as I was saying from the last slide, you could have the potential for that youth to be formally processed through court depending on what level of offense it was. They could be placed in diversion, or our community agencies, they could be referred there. We call that like our warrant of release, where we'll do the assessment, we'll identify what they need, and we feel like that family is comfortable enough to go forward on their own. I should keep in mind too, and let y'all know that we handle all new offenses that come in. So even the high-grade felony cases are handled through the MARC Center. So we do have some that will go to detention, and we will still do that case processing part with them to try to expedite that, get it through court as quickly as we can, so that family can move on with a plan that will benefit them. So the benefits for law enforcement: it eliminates the time they spend with those youth at their stations, waiting for the guardian to call them back, finding the guardian. They can bring them to us quickly, and then we take that burden off their hands, and then it's our responsibility to help them find that guardian. They get assistance with dealing with status offenses. Many of our law enforcement officers, they are amazing, but they were never trained to go out to a home and negotiate with a family to get a youth to clean his room. They go out to the home over and over and over again with circumstances like that, and eventually maybe the youth punches a hole in the sheetrock, and then it becomes a criminal charge. We want to be there to assist them before it even gets to that point, so they know that they can refer status offense cases to us, low-level status offense cases to us, and we can assist. We feel like that law enforcement believes that if they're able to do that, it does reduce recidivism. If we're able to intervene early on, that behavior doesn't root in. And then naturally, even though we're not open all the time, there's a 24-hour hotline. The way that works is our detention center is open 24 hours a day. If we get a call after hours and the MARC is not open, detention can triage that call, and they can assist law enforcement or the family with what their needs are. And it may be that they need some kind of a respite for 72 hours, which we have a children's shelter that we can do. If that is necessary, that's something they can look at. Or it could be as easy as the MARC Center calling them the next morning at 8 a.m. when we open our doors, getting with the family, getting them in, and seeing what we can do to assist. For the community, we have non-traditional hours. This means they don't have to worry about leaving work, their child missing school to be able to come in for assistance. They can come in anytime, and they can come in on an impulse too. We know that there are honeymoon periods with our families where they go through cycles where things blow up and then they calm down and maybe they're less motivated to come in. We want them to be able to come in at, I don't want to say their worst moment, but when they know they need help, we want them to have that opportunity to come in and see us. The faster processing times from arrest to intake also benefits that youth. We talked about that earlier. It's a very good opportunity for them to come in, address what's going on, and then move on from that circumstance. I say similar to me, if I go into work late for a month, and then Tony, my director now, comes in and says, I'm writing you up because you've been coming in late. There's a problem there because I got used to doing it and thinking it was okay. And now it's kind of ingrained in me that I get to work about 5 minutes late every day. That's going to be a tougher habit for me to break out of. So we know if we can intervene earlier for youth and even for everything in our lives, the chances of curbing that behavior increase. The single point of entry, that we can't say that enough. We've got a lot of great service in our community that families don't necessarily know of. We wanted to be that single point where they come to us, law enforcement calls if they have a problem, the school calls if we have a problem, and we assist them with that. We can point them in the right direction. I tell people all the time, if you're up late at night watching infomercials and you see a plumber commercial come on, you may hear it 5 or 6 times, but 2 days from then, whenever you have a leak in your house, you're not going to remember that. So we want to make sure that families don't need to remember what the service is. They can just come to us and we can say, I think I know what you're talking about. Is this it? And if it is, hopefully they move forward with it and they have that support that they need. We do have evidence-based programming. We have multi-systemic therapy and functional family therapy in our area. We have, counselors that are doing cognitive behavioral therapy. We also have some amazing grassroots programs that, in my opinion, sometimes work better than some of the evidence-based programs. Not that the evidence-based programs don't work well, but for some of our lower level cases, sometimes they just need some good mentors in the community who can help nudge them in the right direction. One of the biggest things I think we do too is we stay data driven. So if we see a need through data, if we have a certain type of circumstance come in 2, 3, 4 times, we have the ability to change our course to address those circumstances. And with us being on a parish level, it makes it much easier. It could be 3 people coming in a room together saying, we have this issue, we need to find a support for it, and then we're able to move forward with it. All right, quickly into some of our screening tools. See how we're doing on time. Okay, need to get this moving. So our JIFF screening tool, or Juvenile Inventory for Functioning, is a primary screening tool we use. It's an online-based screening tool that the youth sit on the computer and they complete. I will say this from being a counselor in the past, I am surprised at how much information youth will give you in a computer-based screening tool versus having a conversation with them. It actually saves a good bit of time. If you look at the JIFF scales that are on the right-hand side there, those are all the domains that the JIFF goes through. And depending on how a youth answers in each one of those domains, those answers can tree out and those questions can tree out into additional questions. The ones that are in red are what we call the JIFF flags. If a youth would flag in any of these areas, it would trigger us to do a secondary screening. The JIFF gives us a 30-day snapshot. So if we know a youth in the past 30 days had issues in any of these areas, we want to know about the here and now. So I just wanted to show you the primary areas that we have youth identifying that they're having issues in. School, noncompliance in home, feelings, and then you have your unsafe community behaviors. But these are all circumstances that youth may be coming into us for a delinquency issue or status offense issue, different things like that, or maybe they're a walk-in. But these are all circumstances that can be addressed very early on. And we feel like that, like I said, if we can get a youth in there early on and address these circumstances, it will keep them out of the system or from penetrating deeper in there. So the secondary screening tool that we use is the MAYSI. Many people are probably familiar with that, Massachusetts Youth Screening Instrument. It's used in many detention centers. The MAYSI kind of tells us the right now what's going on, so that we like to use that if that youth flags on the JIFF. If the youth flags in any of the areas you see in red here, that will cause us, and thought disturbance in boys also, that causes us to make that CART contact that we were talking about, where the licensed counselor comes in, meets with the youth, makes sure they're safe to go home. If the JIFF would happen to flag for substance abuse issues, we use our SASI, or Substance Abuse Subtle Screening Instrument, to gauge the level of risk from their substance abuse. At the end, the SASI basically has 2 scales of high probability or low probability for a substance abuse disorder, and depends on what the findings are, I guess, with that is the direction we will go. High probability, that's probably referring them to an addictions counselor or a counselor that specializes in or can handle those types of cases to see if they need to be in therapy. Low probability may be that we monitor that youth a couple of times, give them drug screens, and see if they're able to stop that behavior now that we've identified that issue with the increased monitoring support from the guardians. And the last screening tool we use, which is a relatively new screening tool for us, and I'm hearing that it's going to be changing again, is the Intervene screening tool through Shared Hope International. We use this for youth that we suspect may be victims of trafficking. Not to get too deep into it, but it's basically a 2-tiered type of screening tool. On tier 1, 9 non-licensed probation officers can administer it. It basically goes through and tries to identify existence of vulnerabilities to potential sex trafficking. Tier 2 is where, once you've identified them on tier 1, and a licensed counselor will come in, meet with the youth, and then they're trying to get a little more information about those vulnerabilities to explore them a little deeper or confirm if there's possible sex trafficking going on. So the dispositions, the type of outcomes we can have for cases, we can provide information to families. That could be as simple as someone walking in saying, I don't want to speak to you at all. I just want to know about a counseling service. And we give them a brochure for one. Counsel and release, that's where families can come in as walk-ins and we're able to meet with them, identify their needs, give them a plan, and then they choose to go on their own. I should say that families do have the right to enter our status offense program without being formally referred by the school system or law enforcement, but we try to discourage that because as them coming in as walk-ins, we can give them the same exact supports like we said, even if they come in informally like that. And the family can come in the very next day if they need continued support from us. We have pre-court diversion. Just to go over that really quickly, we actually will monitor youth at the MARC Center that are in our diversion program for up to 6 months. We like to catch them doing well. We're there to support if they need us. We do monitor and check in with them from time to time, but we're not trying to catch them doing wrong. If they're in the parameters that we need them to be in with their diversion contract, then we're really only meeting with them or calling them once a month and meeting with them every 90 days. So we got to a point where we were doing these things to about 2013. So we had a few years under our belt. We knew what we wanted to accomplish, but we really needed to see if we actually were accomplishing that. So we partnered with Vera to do an outcome study. And what we were really looking for was, are youth referred to the MARC Center more likely to be successfully diverted compared to prior? Does the MARC reduce the net widening effect? So we decided to go out and tell everyone to send us every kid with any issue. Were we net widening? Were we getting more kids that were being involved in the system? And did the implementation increase the speed of service delivery and case processing times of youth? We were very happy with the outcomes that we saw. Case processing decreased from 17 days to 3.9 days. Chance of reoffense went from 26 to 12%. And our status referrals that were already going down decreased fivefold. That meant that a lot of the families that were walking in, we weren't increasing even a net widening effect of them going into our status offender program. And the school system wasn't dumping. I shouldn't say dumping, that's bad. They weren't sending us additional referrals. The referral stayed steady that they were sending us already. But once we got that information and we had a few years under our belt, we started really looking at our processes. Our processes were set up to try to get kids in as quickly as we could. And the way we knew to do that was if law enforcement arrested them, we wanted them to bring them into the MARC Center. That was the way to cut that time down, that when we were looking at, went from months to days, case processing times. But we really started thinking, and with the help of some of our school, law enforcement agents that went to school, that we really have to arrest the kids, handcuff them, and put them in the back of a police car to get them timely services. We realized we didn't have to do that, if we had good community buy-in and everyone's on the same page, we can get those kids in just as timely a manner without them having to be formally charged or brought to us in a patrol car. And that started our process of redefining our direction at the MARC Center. We didn't have to look very far for the service that would do this. It was our walk-in service that had been there the whole time. So how did we start to push our walk-in services? Well, for schools, we went to them and said we can provide them immediate supports. Principal has a family in their office. They need assistance. That principal will have that family leave. They're going to have to write up that formal status referral. It's going to have to get to us. We're going to have to receive it. We're going to have to try to call the family. We're going to have to try to set up an appointment. Days to weeks can go through that process. We let the principals know, if you're having an issue with a kid right now, tell them they can come into the MARC as a walk-in. They can leave your office and walk directly in and we can assist them. For parents, it was going back and going against some of the things that we were even saying when the MARC first opened. Parents would call in having issues and we would be sorry, there's not a whole lot we can do without a paper trail. There's no charges that have been filed against your child, or you haven't called law enforcement. Started really looking at that and saying that doesn't really make sense. So we started going back to parents and saying, we don't want you to call law enforcement first, call us first. And that was for our youth that were already on probation. We wanted to be that first call. Come into the MARC Center, call us. Let us assist you. Let us try to de-escalate the situation before you call law enforcement out there for assistance. With law enforcement, they always had the opportunity for discretion. And we just kept reorienting that to them. So when an officer would call in and he's working with a youth and he really doesn't want to charge him, we'd be like, well, you don't have to charge them. Why don't you just have them come into the MARC Center? Why don't you give them a referral? Also, law enforcement, if they did feel like they were having to charge them, they can fax that OJGS referral form to us, and they don't have to put that youth in the back of a patrol car. We can get that OJGS referral form as soon as he finishes it, and we can call that family, and they can be in within 3 hours of the offense happening. We could still do that timely, provide them with a timely interventions. For our community providers, I used to be a community provider. We know that most of them have safety plans in our area at least. And part of it is if things escalate to a point of uncontrolled after hours, to call law enforcement. But we got with all our providers that were providing services to our youth and the ones that weren't, and we said, we want to be part of your safety plan. We want to be on there that if things get out of control after 5, when that counselor's at home or that service provider's at home, that they call us first. That family knows they can come into the MARC Center and call us. And one of the last things we did, which is very, very new for us, is a partnership with Child Protection Services, primarily through their kinship program. So there was a lot of aunts, uncles, grandparents that are adopting kids and these youth in the community, and they're scared to reach back out to help for child protection that they may lose custody. So Child Protection recognized this, and they realized they needed to have a neutral site where families can come anonymously and get the supports they need. So they orient them to the MARC Center, and families are able to come in as a walk-in. We're able to support them with whatever their need is, and then they can leave, and we don't report any of that back to Child Protection unless it's a mandated reporter issue naturally. I don't really have a lot of time to get into this, but this is just for y'all, and y'all have the slideshow, but this will go back and show you a little bit about what's going on at the MARC, what walk-in cases actually look like. They can be a lot more complicated than many may think. So how do we get buy-in? I'm going to try to run through this quickly too. We went to shift meetings. You've got to go out and talk to law enforcement. You got to let them know what you're doing. And you also have to be able to take some feedback that may not be the most palatable feedback. But if something's not working out for them, you have to take that and you have to realize that you have to take that back and you have to make changes, because we need to make sure our law enforcement's bought in and that it's meeting their needs. We'd go to any community meeting. Anyone that wants to let us speak, we'll go speak on the MARC. School and principal meetings. Every year we go to the counselor meetings and the principal meetings before school starts. We let them know what we're there to do, and we tell them if they have any issues to call us and we'll help them figure it out. We did service provider in services, where we'd go and we'd let them know what we were able to support them with after hours and what the MARC actually can do. Thank you emails. If a principal or a law enforcement officer sends someone to us as a walk-in, we could send them a quick email. It's not a confidentiality issue. We just say, hey, a family came in the other day that you had referred to the MARC Center, and we were able to help them. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for trusting us enough to be able to work with them. And then lastly, we sat down with probation and we said, we want to serve you and we want to serve your youth also. So we made that, we actually formalized that partnership to where they let all their families know after hours to call the MARC or come into the MARC when they're in crisis, and not to call law enforcement for assistance. We took it a step further and we made these cards. We actually made 10,000 of them, and then we're prepared to give these out whenever school gets back in, to where the principals, the teachers, the counselors can hand these to families, and they know how to come in, what we are, how to get in contact with us, when to come in, when our hours of operation are, things like that. So results through aligned contributions. What we were able to do with this partnership with the school system is the DA opened up what they call an early intervention program in 2015. They started taking the light touch youth from the school systems that needed help. If they were unsuccessful, then they would refer that youth to the MARC. And then if we were unsuccessful, that youth could potentially be referred to our status offender program. We were putting layers in place to keep a youth out of the system and still be able to give them opportunities to get the supports they needed. Choices is a wraparound service we have through our Medicaid provider here in Louisiana. They can provide intensive case management services. So we can refer walk-ins to this intensive case management service instead of referring to our status offender case management services. The school approached us a few years back and wanted to know about our diversion program, and their question to us was, why can't we do it? And our response was, why can't you do it? So they actually started their own diversion program for light offenses that happen in the school system. Those types of offenses that may get them placed on an alternative campus, they're now able to stay in their school, and all they have to do is complete a few sessions that they have set up in the school system. And if they successfully complete, they never have to go to the alternative school setting. What this also does is, let's say if it's a low offense, low-grade offense, maybe alcohol consumption, something like that on school property, the DA may get that report. And if we get it, we can get in touch with the school. If they went through the diversion program, the DA will look at it and they'll reject that charge because the youth already went through a diversion program. another layer keeping them out of the system. The truancy, elementary truancy, we were getting referrals, and we handle all the truancy referrals to the MARC Center. 30, 40 days missed towards the end of the school years. I'm like, what are we going to do with this? They missed so many days of school. Even if we get them back in school, they're already behind, or are they going to pass for the year? So we partnered with the school system and said, don't hold the referrals. Send them to us as quickly as you can. So they agreed to start sending referrals to us. Once a youth has missed 5 days, that referral would start coming our way. And we were very proud to say that that year when we did it, they were able to show that there was a 26% decrease in elementary age youth missing more than 10 days. There's a correlation. I'm not going to say it's causation of why this happened, but I think it also put it on the school's mind to be monitoring truancy more and being more proactive with it too. It's one of those things that when you have the conversation, things can improve. We do have shelter care in our area, and that's one thing we partnered with them in 2017 on. We can place youth in our shelter care for a 72-hour respite, but also law enforcement could, and families could reach out for that placement also. But the shelter care decided that if law enforcement reached out to them directly or a parent, they wouldn't necessarily grant that shelter care right away. They want them to come to the MARC Center, which gave us an opportunity to explore if there were any family supports that they can possibly go to, aunt and uncles maybe for a couple of days till things cool off. And we found that we were able to decrease the number of youth who were being placed in shelter care by using family supports for that. And the last one was the child protection that we talked about through the kinship partnership, that we're working with them as that neutral site to get those families the assistance so they don't have to stress and fret about possibly losing custody if they have needs that aren't being met. So by staying focused on results and including, and when I say all of us staying focused, the big piece of the puzzle that's sometimes left out is the families. They're the experts in the room. They know what's going on. But by staying focused on those results for all children in Calcasieu Parish to be happy, healthy, and successful, good things can happen. And when I say good things, without a formal referral or an informal referral on youth, that youth cannot be placed in detention, can't be petitioned to court, cannot be placed on probation, and cannot penetrate deeper in the system if they're already in the system. Yes, there's always going to be a place for youth in the court system and for youth to be on probation. We know that. But how much better can we serve those youth that are going to court and are on probation if we can take the other youth that really may not need to be there and we can support them through diversion processes? How much better will they be able to serve those youth that really need their time? I often tell our judges that 40% of their docket probably doesn't need their time, and the other 60% really does. And if we can get that balance to where we're really focusing on the right kids, I think our outcomes will continue to get better. Just really quickly, because I'm almost running over here a little bit. This is what a breakdown looks like of the types of referrals that we will get by year. Walk-ins is naturally the ones we said where families are coming in our own or they're referred independently by the school system and law enforcement. Status are those law enforcement referrals, community provider referrals, school system referrals. Delinquent is primary referrals that we're getting from the DA's office. This is district attorney sending them to us after an offense report has been created. And then law enforcement referrals are the ones that are coming directly into the MARC Center. We're very pleased to show that when you look at the percentages over the years, that walk-ins is now our second highest percentage referral. I'd really like to see it take delinquency over. We're not quite there yet, but it looks like things are moving in the right direction. And when you look at dispositions by court-related cases, we're able to divert a good number of kids, but just for transparency, even in 2019, out of 184 youth that were petitioned to court, I say we could have easily knocked another 40 or so off of that if we just continue to push that needle forward. Now, it'd be really good to end on this data and show y'all that we are decreasing numbers. I'm sorry, I had one more slide here. This is what it looks like overall for us since the MARC opened its doors. So since opening our doors in 2011, we've served over 11,000 youth. We've provided 31% of those 11,000 with immediate supports within hours. We've diverted 82% of those 11,000 youth from formal processing. And we've kept 27% of those 11,000 from even a light touch of the juvenile justice system. And what that means is we've kept them from being in the status offender program. 7% of our families that came through got assistance through walk-in services, or we were able to warn and release them, and they weren't placed in the juvenile justice system. So when we look at that as a benchmark, from 2014 where we were, in 2019, we had petitions were down 42%, status referrals were down 68%, delinquent referrals were down 3%, and overall detention placements were down 36%. We also had our walk-ins that went up by 7%. I don't want to lie to you. It's covered up there. And delinquent diversions are up 22%. And like I said, this is all good. But unfortunately, you have to really disaggregate your data to know, is everyone getting equitable opportunities at these successes we're finding? And what we looked at the MARC Center as we're looking at youth that are being diverted by race, from 2017 to 2019, we did have a decrease in the percentage of youth that are being diverted by race. Our youth of color are being diverted less right now. And when you look at also the youth that are being petitioned, we start to see that we're really having an issue here that we have to address. So from 2017 to 2019, youth of color being petitioned went from 62% to 71%. So while our overall number is driving down, unfortunately, the disparities are increasing. So this is something we have in the forefront of our mind right now. And you have to get intentional about it. You have to have those conversations about equity, and you have to show that data in every meeting, and you have to let people look at those slides, even if they're not pretty, they're ugly to look at, but we have to look at them. We have to keep it at the forefront of everything we're doing, and we have to push forward. Some of the ways we push forward is we knew that we wanted to partner with Reimagine Juvenile Justice as a pilot site. This is a group through School of Maine and the Annie E. Casey Foundation that you go back in, you get trained on it, and you go back into your community, and it goes over these modules you see here underneath it. They're on the left side. And you go through each one of these modules, and they're all infused with racial and ethnic disparities, addressing that, and positive youth development. So we got together with all our collaborators, and we're continuing to have these meetings where cross-system collaboration is happening, and we're all identifying that we all have these issues in our own individual agencies, and we're trying to find ways as a whole to address them. We also partnered with Justice for Families for our own staff, so they were understanding of racial and ethnic disparities and how to really authentically engage with families instead of just having them at the table, having them be an active participant. And then we were very proud that one of our local police departments here for the city actually received a grant from the Law Enforcement Leadership Equity Initiative to start disaggregating their data and looking at racial disparities in their arrest of youth. Having those conversations aren't going to get us there as a whole, but it will help us to start pushing that needle forward. Just really quickly, we do handle the Alternatives of Detention program also at the MARC Center. We had non-traditional hours. It was just a better fit for us, and we like to catch the kids doing well. So once again, what that means is youth leaves his house 11:30 at night. We get that alert. We can call immediately, hopefully get that kid back home versus waiting till the next day whenever he's been gone for maybe 10, 12 hours, and you're trying to figure out whether or not we're going to have to violate him or not. We also have our case processing officer that's housed under the MARC. His goal is to go into court and push these new cases through that have to go to court as quickly as possible, but also to press in that courtroom if we can to try to get that youth brought back to diversion if it's a low-level offense. Lessons learned during our time, results should be equitable. If not, it has to be addressed. We can celebrate our kids, our decrease in our kids being petitioned to court, but we can't stop there. We still have a lot of work to do, as you can see. A juvenile justice system is not always the answer. Families are always the answer. Families hold the expertise with this. If we can actively engage with them and get them involved, we're going to have more successes. If the only tool you have is a hammer, we say that all the time. If law enforcement only has arresting powers, they're eventually going to use those powers. If the school system only has ways of possibly sending informal referrals, they're going to use that. When we gave our families, school system, law enforcement, court system, different opportunities and different tools, they use them. They're embracing them. How early is too early? We never feel like it's too early to intervene with a youth and a family if done appropriately. And most importantly, always let the data guide you. This is just a saying that y'all can go back and look at. Basically, law enforcement officer was saying that they really feel more confident in their ability to help youth now that the MARC Center is opened. Lessons learned, you want to engage court officials and law enforcement from the beginning. They have to be bought into the process, and they have to be part of creating that process. Their needs need to be met too. COVID-19 brought adaptive challenges for everyone, but for us, we really were able to switch over to doing virtual intakes, and we haven't skipped a beat. We actually find that we haven't lost a whole lot of fidelity with our process, with it not being face-to-face. And it also assists some of our outlying families that may not have reliable transportation, that may live 45 minutes away from the MARC Center. We can do those intakes virtually. So when we get back to face-to-face, we definitely want that. That is best. But we also plan on using some of these tools in the future to help improve our family's opportunity of compliance. And if you're looking to have an assessment center, the National Assessment Center Association has opened its doors as of late last year. They're able to provide a wealth of information on assessment centers around the nation. And it really helps you not to be operating in a vacuum. You can learn from the mistakes that we have all made and that we continue to make, and hopefully skip some of those steps to get to your success. And then I just want to end it on something we do here, and the Casey Foundation is the ones that offered this tool to us. It's the My Child Challenge. Every time that we're working with a youth, we like to sit back and say, is this the way that I would want my family or my child to be handled if they were in the circumstances? It really helps us to keep that at the forefront of our minds to make sure we're putting our best foot forward for families. So we always ask ourselves, do we pass? And I hope you all have something similar that you also use to know if you're passing. All right, that is it. I did terrible with time. I'm sorry about that, but I am done now.
We'll forgive you for that. We're going to get to the questions. We had a whole lot of them. We're probably not going to be able to get these through even half. How is the MARC financed, and how are partnering agencies compensated for services that they provide? So
I should have not left that slide out. We primarily are financed through a millage tax we have on our property taxes. That's the primary we have. We do have some other smaller grants out there that give us some money, but the staples come from that millage. We do have a few contract providers like our shelter care that we do contract with, and we fund them. But what we found in our community is there's a lot of providers out there that need clients to make money, right? And I don't want to ever say our kids are commodities, because they're not, but they know we have a pool of youth that they can work with, and we challenge them to meet the needs of our youth if they want us to refer to them. So we have a lot of service providers that we partner closely with that really seem to do a good job and engage with our youth in a timely manner. We challenge them to make sure there's not waiting times, and we also challenge them to make sure that they're sending us appropriate progress reports, so we know we don't need to know everything that's going on. We just want to know if the family is finding success and if they're satisfied with that service. So we have the ability to refer to these different agencies in a manner that it keeps it competitive for them, and they want to serve our youth. But we do naturally still have our primary ones that we use, that we contract with for functional family therapy and individual therapy, and our shelter care.
Great. Okay. How many cultures or languages are the staff at the MARC able to work with effectively, and how culturally competent are the assessments? So the assessments, I will say, as far as cultural competence goes, I'm going to say that they are fairly cultural competent. They are in multiple languages. In our area, primarily right now, English is the predominant language. We are having an influx prior to our storms and everything else. We were having an influx of Latinos in our area, and that is an area that we are struggling right now. None of us are bilingual. We rely on we do contract with a group called La Familia that will come in as translators for us. They've translated a lot of the documentations we have, because we really got nervous when we started having families come in that were non-English speaking, and the legal documents we're looking at were in English. So we immediately, a couple of years ago, took care of that. And anytime we're doing an intake with a family, we try to make sure that contracted translator is there. If it's an emergency crisis when they come in, sometimes they'll have a family member that can help with translation. But that is something, honestly, we're struggling in now, because it's a newer circumstance for it, and we're trying to stay ahead of the game. But it seems like we're missing opportunities in our community for these types of services to be able to assist. Is there a limit to the number of times a family can be referred? No, there is no limit. In fact, some families just call in after they come into MARC just to vent to one of our employees,
and they'll sit on the phone with them for 15 minutes. And, you kind of go through it on your own. They process it through that conversation, and they're good to go when they get off. Sometimes families want to come back in just to say hi. We've had kids ride their bikes up there to come back in and get apple juice at times. So the door is always open. And in fact, just so y'all know, in Vera's report, they noted that if a youth would even come in the defense program time and time again, they did not see that as a negative as long as it didn't penetrate to the delinquent side.
How long does the online screening assessment take for youth to complete compared to completing it in person?
So it's about 30 minutes is what our JIFF takes. And then the MAYSI, I would say most youth would finish that in probably about 20 minutes. SASSY would probably be about 15 minutes. I won't almost say they're quick, but some youth, can go through them pretty quickly. Another youth may want, because you have the opportunity, you have your blank spaces where you could type stuff out in there, and some of them really like to type a lot of information, which is good for us. But those youth may take a little longer when they're doing that.
How are the youth monitored?
Okay, so when a youth comes in custody in the back, we have an officer or a MARC employee that will sit back there with them while they're there. Whenever the youth custody is exchanged over, we continue to monitor the youth, but not like a direct monitoring because they're back in the guardian's care. We do have cameras in our JIFF rooms, in our secure area, and in our conference rooms. We do not have cameras in the counseling area. They do not have any type of, there's no audio. And what happens is if we do have a youth that's in our facility, the person at the front desk will monitor those cameras, not watching everything they're doing for a negative way, just to make sure they're safe, basically. Did I get that question right? Were they talking about in the center, or were they talking about how are they monitored on diversion?
It was not specified. It just asked how the youth were monitored. Okay,
well, let me go a different direction with that. I'll answer it both ways. So if a youth is on diversion with us, we have phone contacts with them once a month, and a 90-day face-to-face is the way it's set up. We also check in with the school, and we check in with their service provider just to make sure that things are going well, not to get any information necessarily on the counseling or the service they're in. Now, that can be increased to whatever they need. If they're doing well and they seem to be pretty independent of us, that's the minimum that we will have contact with them. If they need contact daily, weekly, we can do that too. We can set up anything they want. So they really have a lot of control over that.
Well, we probably have time for one more question. It's almost 1 o'clock. Can you address gang activity as a presenting concern?
So we don't have what people would call, or our law enforcement would identify as true gangs for our youth here. We have what they call hybrid gangs, which unfortunately sometimes, I don't want to say they're more dangerous. They're not more dangerous, but they're what they do is a lot less calculated. And what they may consider to be a gang-related activity may just be something they're doing, and they're saying they're doing it for their gang. So it's very unstructured. But what we try to do is we try to address that right off the bat if we know a youth is involved with a gang. And we do have a program, and I'm drawing a blank on the name of it, but it's called the GREAT program that our law enforcement agency put together. Gang resistance, I can't think of the whole acronym, but they do meet with kids and they try to mentor them and try to lead them in a positive direction. They feel like they are at risk of being involved in a gang. And I want to say too, I love answering questions like this, and y'all had some really cool questions. I don't normally get these awesome questions. So any questions y'all have, I don't mind reaching out individually and answering those questions for anyone. I would actually love to do that because I learned at the same time, as y'all are asking me questions, I realized that we're doing terrible right now at our bilingual services, and I really need to get on that. So I enjoy stuff like this. So I don't mind. I'll commit to answering anyone's questions that we can't get to today.
Okay, well, and I'll tell you, if you have questions, this is Shelley Salter again. Go ahead and email me. It's michelle.salter@nebraska.gov. We'll do our best to put them together and maybe create a document, because I know the stuff you're talking about is so important to us here. So Josh, thank you so much. I just want to tell you how much I appreciate acknowledging the importance of our data and being intentional about our race work, and for showing us that we can create something that will help our law enforcement agencies by giving them something that was created to work with kids and their families, and for reminding us that if we have the conversations, things can improve. Look at the child, not the charge, is kind of a mantra here in Douglas County these days. So I appreciate hearing that from other jurisdictions. So thank you. I hope you guys get back to normal, or at least our COVID unnormal normal compared
Yes,
to
y'all wish me luck of
normal.
getting out of my parents' house soon. They're probably ready to send me to the MARC Center. If I had
They
to-
are. All the parents know they are. But and then everybody else, remind you that we'll be here again October 21st for noon to 1 to see Doris Moore come and talk to us about special considerations for African-American families and therapy. And that then in November, we're going to start chapter 1 of this conference we started, with our theme being understanding the Black and Brown cultures, for a few months. We have a great lineup of some different people coming to tell us things about culture that we need to consider in doing our work, remembering that reform is about the adults changing the way we do the work and not our kids and families. So thank you all for being here. Josh, thank you so much for being here, and for your parents letting us use your house so that we can see you. Good luck, and I'm sure I'll see you again and hope to see Tony soon. Everyone else, if you have questions, email them. Thank you, and we will see you next month.
Y'all have a great afternoon.